Feudal Tower and Catholic Church Power. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Bogdell, MEDMA. We're at Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is September 8th, 2020. On this date in history, uh, in 1974, Richard Nixon resigned or was pardoned by Gerald Ford. On a personal note, 4 days ago, my parents celebrated their 49th anniversary. So let's have a good time this year, everyone. Starting with this class, we kind of have to do a little bit of a review of geography just to kind of see uh, how everything fits together. Now, this is a map with Europe superimposed over North America. And as you can see, the southernmost cities aren't much further south than, I would say, Kansas. Okay. So, as a result of this, they're a much colder area than the United States is. So, just kind of a fun place to start. If you look at the size of the continents, size in land, Asia by far is the largest continent. Of course, they also have over half the world's population. Africa is the second largest continent by land, and the second largest by population. And then, I mean, I can explain this as it goes down, but if you look at it, Europe has about 3/4 of a billion people, about 4 million square miles. Okay, so it's half the size of North America, and it's pretty close in size to the United States. Okay, some of the different regions of Europe. You have Northern Europe, and that's mainly the Scandinavian peninsula. That'd be Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Okay. Western Europe is really everything from Germany uh, and west of Germany. Okay. And Eastern Germany is kind of what they see as the backward part of Europe. Now, if we're looking at uh, the this is mainly a Western European course and really Northwestern. Okay. And a lot of this class, uh, apparently, the way they've set it up is based on uh, the biggest and most powerful countries of Europe, which would be France, Germany, and England, and then to a lesser degree maybe Austria. And countries over in that part of Europe are really the focus of where this class goes. We'll talk about the other countries as well, but nowhere near as in depth as uh, Northwestern Europe. Okay, so looking here, we have the Jutland Peninsula, which is Denmark. You have the Scandinavian Peninsula, which is Norway, Sweden, and Finland. You have the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain. You have the Italian Peninsula, which is, forget which country that is. Oh, yeah, Italy. The Balkan Peninsula, which is Greece, and then several other countries in addition to that. The Anatolian Peninsula, which is Turkey. The Crimean Peninsula, which right now is under the control of Russia, but it changes from time. Okay, then moving on here in Europe, you have the Mediterranean Sea at the bottom, and we'll talk about that more here in just a minute. You have the North Sea, which is right here between uh, Great Britain, Denmark, and the coast of the Netherlands and Belgium. You have the Atlantic Ocean, which I'm not going to explain. You have the Baltic Sea, which is the area between Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and Sweden and Finland. You have the Black Sea, which is really cut off from other areas except through the Strait of Dardanelles between Turkey and Greece. and gets you to the Mediterranean. You have the Aegean Sea, which is between Greece and Turkey. The Adriatic Sea, which is between Italy and, well, the peninsula that Greece is on. The Tyrrhenian Sea, which is between Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, and the Italian peninsula. The Bay of Biscay, which is off the coast of both Spain and France. The Strait of Gibraltar, which is the water that connects the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. The Dardanelles Strait that I talked about earlier, that's over by the Black Sea. The Arctic Ocean, way up at the top. And the English Channel, which runs between France and Great Britain. And the Caspian Sea, which isn't pictured, which is it's really what separates Europe and Asia, even though most of the land is connected. The Mediterranean Sea was the center of trade for most of what they would have called, and by they I mean the people who lived at the time, the civilized world. That's where the majority of trade was. It took place. Uh, Connected Africa and Asia in some points, so you could get all types of products from the far reaches of the world. You also have most of the islands aren't really habitable for the most part. They are very mountainous, quite beautiful, but mountainous. And there's so much pollution in the Mediterranean Sea that one of the sources I read said it would take thousands of years to clean up, which sounds like a load of crap. Okay, so the medieval Catholic Church, after the fall of the Roman Empire, there was really no strong power in the Western or in the Eastern Hemisphere. And so the Catholic Church kind of holds that, and the Pope is really the most powerful man in the world for about 1,000 years. Okay, so the priests, they're in charge of local communities. They're called parishes. Uh, Many of them are normally pretty poor on the lowest level. Now, a bishop, they're in charge of a group of priests or groups of parishes. And if you go up above, I mean, you also have archbishops and you have cardinals, but the pope is the leader of the church. Uh, Supposed to be following Peter, who was kind of recognized after he died as the first pope or the chief apostle, the leader of the Catholic Church in the world. Pope Gregory was one of the first really powerful popes. He strengthened the power of the pope, and they took control of the papal states, or really the center to lower parts of Italy, and they controlled them until about 1881. So for about 1,400 years, they controlled most of that. Now, there's sometimes when the Pope's powers are less, and there's some where they're more. So they controlled about one third of the land in Western Europe, and they will until the Protestant Reformation and the whenever the English Church, the Anglican Church, begins, and you start to have some changes. But for about 1,000 years, they control about a third of the land in Western Europe. They tried to cut down the amount of time that people went to war, and war was really limited at the time anyway because you had to get home to farm, and if you had everyone out fighting and no one to harvest crops, then you might have some type of famine come up. Uh, 1/10 of everything that people made, they were told to give to the church. That's called a tithe, and that's a normal thing in the church, and many churches still abide by that today. They also had Peter's pence, which was 1 penny per person. Penny in those days was more than what it is today. Over time, it changed. I'd tell you how much, but I'd be lying. Okay, so Saint Benedict, he was the one who kind of starts to organize all of the priests and all of the monks. Mainly, he was responsible for the monks. He started a monastery, and they had their day laid out from beginning to end. Okay, prayer, physical labor, even when they sleep, everyone took a vow of poverty, and many of them, their job was to copy the Bible. And anytime you got a book from this time period, it was always copied by hand. There were no photocopy machines. Photocopy machines were people. And they would also draw pretty elaborate items on them, as you can see on the left hand side of the screen. That is a book written in Latin. A monk is someone who dedicated themselves to God, and they would try and spend their life serving the church and serving God, the Christian God. Uh, Monasticism is living the life of a monk. Missionaries are people that go with a religious message. Normally, they're sent to foreign countries to try and convert or share their message. And a nun is a woman that dedicates her life to God, the Christian God. So you look right here. This is the schedule of a monk. If you like sleeping, then it looks like you get a fairly decent amount in the winter. But the weird thing is, you get up at about 2:30 in the morning. Now, during the summer, you would get up at about 1:30 in the morning. Okay, you'd go to bed about 8:30 at night in the summer, but you actually spend a great chunk of your day uh, at a church service, meditating and reading. And in the winter, if you can see, you only eat once a day. Now, in the summer, you get to eat twice a day, but uh, winter, you've got less time. Uh, you spend a lot of the day at church or in meditation and reading. The development of feudalism. Okay, feudalism is it starts in Western Europe and it will stay in Russia for about 500 years after it's done in Europe, until about 1917 during the Russian Revolution. Okay, and feudalism, there's a whole hierarchy of who's important and who's not. At the very top, you've got the king. Underneath the king, you've got your lords. Underneath your lords, you have your knights. And then at the very bottom, you have who are your serfs or your peasants. Okay, the nobles would protect people. Okay, and you would give land out for people to work for you as a noble or as a king. So everyone was. It's basically a pyramid scheme where people at the top were loaning land to people, and then they'd give some of their land, and then they'd give some of their land, until you get to the very bottom, and you have the people that are working the fields or would go into battle with tools like they would use, on the land. So you don't have any fantastic or magnificent weapons to take into battle. Uh, so a knight is someone on horseback. This is the most common and most powerful type of fighter at the time. Many of them would carry swords that weighed about 10 to 12 pounds, which may not sound like much until you swing something around that weighs 10 to 12 pounds. A vassal is a man who served a lord in a military sense, and a fief is a land granted by the lord to a vassal. Here you see a nice shot of the pyramid that I was talking about. They're unwritten rules that controlled the lord and the vassal relationship. Basically, everyone underneath the king was loyal to the people above them, who was loyal to the king above them. Okay, vassals would advise the lords would advise the king. Nobility, that is kings, dukes, counts, barons, and bishops and archbishops. So the dukes, counts, and barons are normally family or extended family of the king. Now they could be several generations past, but during this time period, you would marry into those families to try and strengthen those relationships. The bishops and archbishops were both members of the church. The thing that was supposed to gauge everyone's behavior at the time was this idea of chivalry or chivalrous behavior, where you're civilized, you defend the defenseless, the women, the children, the elderly. Okay, you take care of the people that you're fighting with, who surrender to you, and you're fighting for the glory of the king or the glory of the Christian God. Hope everyone's having fun. Okay, so during this time period, new agriculture came into play. You have different ways of producing food. Okay, so iron would make this really heavy plow called the karuka, and it's pulled by horses instead of ox, oxen. Don't say oxes like I just did. So they're pulled by horses. They last a lot longer. They actually make smaller lines to farm in, so you can actually plant more rows of crops. Uh, and You have several people that own these together and share. They also started crop rotation to where you're not farming the same thing on the same fields all the time, and you leave part of the land fallow every couple of years so that you don't grow anything on it, and some of the minerals can get back into the soil, so it would be good farmland again. This is the image of a medieval castle. It's Carsone. It's I don't know. It looks pretty cool. I think it's what most of you have seen in movies. There's been some repairs and some uh, modern additions to this so that it's in a little bit better shape. But this is a medieval castle. Most of them were not this large. They were much smaller because of the grand scale of having to build anything like that. Okay, so in the manorial system, peasants worked the lord's estates on the fiefs of the vassals. So you wouldn't really own the land. The people above you would own the land, and they would let you farm it. By the way, you couldn't just go hunting anywhere because most of it was either the king's or lord's land, and you were banned from doing that. These estates that were owned by the vassals are called manors. Okay, and many of the peasants, because they did not have land of their own, eventually will become bound to the land and traded as, part of the land. Okay, they couldn't leave without the Lord. They couldn't get married without the Lord signing off on it. Okay, uh, they would try the peasants in their own courts. Uh, they couldn't take away the land that belonged to a serf, but they did have to protect them. And if you were a serf, there were certain things that you had to do. Okay, right here you see the common fields. That's for everyone. Uh, and the orange areas were the land for the Lord. Normally, they had better irrigation on them and had better products coming out. You'd give the best products the uh, to the lords, and then they'd give some of their best stuff to the king. Okay, you can see the orchard there, which is also off limits to the people working the fields. Up in the forest above and the common pasture in the meadows. They might be raising cows, they might be raising sheep, and on special occasions, you might be able to have some meat. But for the most part, you were getting uh, vegetables, or you were getting the burnt parts of the bread. The parts that weren't burnt, that would be the top part of the bread, not in the pan. That's where the upper crust comes from, and some of the best and softest pieces would go to them, and then the lower pieces would go down the chain. Okay, so many peasants live in one or two room cottages with thatched roofs that would commonly leak, and you and your entire family were in one room. There was no living room, kitchen, bathroom. It was all just in one room. Okay. Uh, there were 50 days a year that were holidays, and they did that to celebrate so that the people would not revolt. Uh, Basically, the church taught you what you were supposed to do to achieve salvation, and many lords and vassals who might not have truly been Christian embraced these ideas because it recognized their authority and uh, made people easier to control. Uh, Many of the messages were done in Latin, which the majority of the population did not understand. So many of these messages weren't communicated as they were written. This is the end of day one. So these are the notes. I hope you had a good day today. I know I did. And I look forward to seeing you on, well, 2 days from now. So I'll be seeing you and have a great day.